Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she adjusted the scope on her rifle for what felt like the 100th time that morning. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly around the military training facility, heat waves dancing in the distance like ghostly mirages. She had been working as a civilian contractor for 3 years now, maintaining the shooting range equipment and replacing practice targets for various military units. It was honest work, and it paid well enough to support her aging mother back in Phoenix. The morning had started like any other. Sarah arrived at the facility at dawn, checked her equipment list, and began her routine rounds. The shooting ranges were spread across several acres, each designed for different types of training. Range Alpha was for basic marksmanship, Range Bravo for advanced rifle training, and Range Charlie for specialized operations she wasn't supposed to ask questions about. She had learned early in her employment that curiosity about military operations wasn't appreciated, so she kept her head down and focused on her job. As she loaded fresh paper targets onto her cart, Sarah couldn't help but think about how different her life had become. 3 years ago, she had been married to David, a construction foreman with big dreams and bigger drinking problems. Their divorce had been messy, leaving her with nothing but debt and a broken trust in people. The job at the military facility had been a lifeline, offering stability and decent benefits. More importantly, it required minimal interaction with others, which suited her just fine after the emotional wreckage David had left behind. The sound of approaching vehicles broke her concentration. A convoy of black SUVs was heading toward Range Charlie, kicking up clouds of dust in their wake. Sarah recognized the signs of a special operations unit arriving for training. These groups were different from the regular military personnel she encountered. They moved with a precision and intensity that made the air itself seem charged with electricity. She had been instructed to stay clear when these units were training, but her job required her to service all the ranges daily. She decided to wait until they were set up before approaching Range Charlie. From her position behind the equipment shed, she watched as approximately 20 men emerged from the vehicles. Even from a distance, she could see they were different. Their movements were synchronized yet fluid, like dancers who had rehearsed the same routine thousands of times. They wore unmarked tactical gear, and their weapons gleamed with professional care and attention. Sarah busied herself with organizing her supplies while keeping one eye on the activity at Range Charlie. The men were setting up for what appeared to be long-distance precision shooting. She recognized some of the equipment they were deploying: sophisticated spotting scopes, wind measurement devices, and rifles that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. This wasn't basic training, this was advanced sniper instruction. After about an hour, the firing began. The sharp cracks of high-powered rifles echoed across the desert, each shot measured and deliberate. Sarah had heard thousands of rounds fired during her time at the facility, but something about these shots was different. There was a rhythm to them, a calculated precision that spoke of extraordinary skill. Each shooter seemed to fire in sequence, with long pauses between shots as they adjusted their positions and recalculated their aim. When the firing stopped, Sarah knew it was time to do her job. She loaded her cart with fresh targets and began the trek across the desert toward Range Charlie. The walk gave her time to think about her life and how she had ended up here. Before David, before the divorce, before the financial ruin, she had been a different person. She had dreams of becoming a teacher, of making a difference in children's lives. But life had a way of derailing dreams, and sometimes survival became more important than ambition. As she approached Range Charlie, she noticed that most of the team had moved to a different section of the range. Only a few men remained near the firing line, and they were engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion about shooting techniques. Sarah had developed a system for situations like this. She would announce her presence, quickly replace the damaged targets, and leave without disrupting their training. It was efficient and professional. She called out as she approached, "Target maintenance, sir." "I'll just be a minute." The men acknowledged her with brief nods but continued their conversation. Sarah moved quickly to the target stands, which were positioned at various distances from the firing line. Some targets were at 300 yards, others at 500, and a few at distances that seemed impossibly far to her untrained eye. The targets told the story of exceptional marksmanship. Most of the paper targets had tight groupings of holes clustered around the center rings. A few targets had single holes precisely placed in the center, evidence of shooters who had achieved perfect accuracy. Sarah had seen good shooting before, but nothing like this. These men were operating at a level of skill that bordered on supernatural. As she worked, replacing the damaged targets with fresh ones, Sarah found herself wondering about the lives of these soldiers. What kind of training created this level of precision? What kind of missions required such extraordinary skill? She knew better than to ask, but her curiosity was naturally aroused by the evidence of their capabilities. One of the soldiers, a tall man with prematurely gray hair and intense green eyes, approached her as she finished replacing the targets at the 300-yard line. "Ma'am," he said in a voice that carried the weight of authority, "we're going to be running some advanced exercises this afternoon. You might want to clear the area earlier than usual." Sarah nodded, appreciating the heads up. "No problem, sir. I'll make sure to finish up quickly." She paused, then added, "Those are some impressive target groupings. You guys are really good at this." The man's expression softened slightly, and, for a moment, she saw something beyond the professional mask, a hint of the person beneath the soldier. "Thank you, ma'am. We train hard to be the best at what we do." He extended his hand. "I'm Command Sergeant Major Thompson." Sarah shook his hand, surprised by the gesture. Most of the special operations personnel she encountered were polite but distant. "Sarah Martinez. I maintain the ranges here." "I know," Thompson said. "I've seen your work. You keep our training facilities in excellent condition. That matters more than you might realize." The compliment caught Sarah off guard. In her 3 years at the facility, she had received plenty of professional acknowledgments, but something about Thompson's words felt different. They carried a weight of genuine appreciation, as if he understood that her work, while support-oriented, was crucial to their mission's success. As they spoke, Sarah became aware that the other soldiers had stopped their conversation and were listening. She felt a moment of self-consciousness, wondering if she was violating some unspoken protocol by engaging in conversation with their leader. But Thompson seemed comfortable with the interaction, so she relaxed slightly. "How long have you been working here?" Thompson asked. 3 years, Sarah replied. "Started right after my divorce. Needed steady work, and this place provides that." Thompson nodded, his expression remaining neutral but somehow understanding. Sarah got the impression that he had encountered many people whose lives had taken unexpected turns, leading them to places they never expected to be. There was wisdom in his eyes, the kind that came from experience with human nature and its complexities. "Well, you're good at what you do," Thompson said. "Clean, efficient, professional. That's exactly what we need to maintain our training standards." As Sarah finished replacing the last target at the 300-yard line, she found herself reluctant to end the conversation. There was something about Thompson's presence that was both commanding and comforting. She had spent 3 years avoiding meaningful connections with people, but something about this man made her want to lower her guard slightly. "I should get moving," she said finally. "Don't want to interfere with your training." "Actually," Thompson said, glancing back at his team, "we're about to start a different kind of exercise. Long-range precision shooting. Some of the targets you just put up are going to be used for shots at distances most people would consider impossible." Sarah looked toward the distant target stands, some of which appeared as tiny specks in the heat-shimmered distance. "How far are some of those shots?" "The furthest target is at 1,200 yards, Thompson replied. "That's nearly 3/4 of a mile. At that distance, you have to account for wind speed and direction, humidity, temperature, even the rotation of the Earth." The complexity of what he was describing fascinated Sarah. She had always thought of shooting as a relatively simple skill point and pull the trigger. But what Thompson was describing sounded more like advanced physics combined with extraordinary hand-eye coordination. "That sounds incredibly difficult," she said. "It is," Thompson agreed. "That's why we train constantly. When lives depend on making an impossible shot, difficult becomes irrelevant. You either make the shot or people die." The gravity of his words settled over Sarah like a weight. For the first time, she truly understood that the training she witnessed wasn't about competition or sport. These men were preparing for situations where their skills would mean the difference between life and death for themselves and others. The responsibility must be enormous. As if sensing her thoughts, Thompson continued, "It's not just about individual skill. Every person in this unit has a role to play. The spotter is just as important as the shooter. The equipment maintenance is crucial. The logistical support is essential. Everyone contributes to the mission's success." Sarah realized he was including her in that assessment. Her work maintaining the ranges and replacing targets wasn't just facility upkeep, it was part of ensuring these men could train at the level required for their missions. The thought gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. "I never really thought about it that way," she admitted. Thompson smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "Most people don't. They see the shooter making the impossible shot and think that's where the skill lies. But behind every successful shot is a team of people who made it possible. The person who maintained the rifle, the person who provided accurate weather data, the person who ensured the training facility was perfect for practice, all of them are part of making that shot successful." A radio crackled on Thompson's equipment vest, and he listened to a brief message before responding. When he turned back to Sarah, his expression had shifted back to professional mode. "We need to begin our exercise," he said. "Thank you for the conversation, Ms. Martinez. And thank you for keeping our ranges in such excellent condition." As Sarah began loading her cart to leave, she found herself thinking about Thompson's words. For 3 years, she had viewed her job as simply a way to pay bills and maintain her independence. But now she saw it differently. She was part of something larger, something that mattered in ways she was only beginning to understand. The sound of rifle fire resumed as she walked back toward the equipment shed. But now each shot carried a different meaning for her. These weren't just practice rounds being fired at paper targets. They were part of a complex training regimen designed to prepare these men for situations where failure wasn't an option. And her work, maintaining the facilities where they trained, was part of ensuring they had every possible advantage when those situations arose. As Sarah reached the equipment shed, she turned back to look at Range Charlie one more time. The soldiers were completely focused on their training, their movements precise and purposeful. Thompson was positioned behind one of the shooters, providing guidance and observations through a spotting scope. Even from a distance, she could see the intensity of their concentration. For the first time since starting her job at the facility, Sarah felt truly connected to the mission. She wasn't just maintaining equipment, she was supporting warriors who risked their lives to protect others. It was a realization that would change how she approached her work and, more importantly, how she viewed her own value and purpose. That evening, as Sarah drove home through the desert landscape, she found herself thinking about the conversation with Thompson. His words had awakened something in her that had been dormant since her divorce, the sense that her work mattered, that she was contributing to something meaningful. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten existed. The next morning, Sarah arrived at work with a different perspective. As she loaded her cart with fresh targets, she thought about the men who would be using them for training. Each target she replaced was an opportunity for someone to improve their skills, to become better prepared for the challenges they would face in the field. It was no longer just maintenance, it was mission support. She found herself paying closer attention to the details of her work. Were the targets perfectly aligned? Were the stands stable and secure? Was every piece of equipment functioning exactly as it should? These details had always mattered to her professionally, but now they mattered personally. She was part of a team, even if her role was different from the operators who trained on the ranges. As the days passed, Sarah began to notice things she had previously overlooked. The way different units approached their training varied significantly. Regular Army units focused on volume and basic accuracy. Special Forces groups emphasized teamwork and communication. But the unit Thompson belonged to operated at a completely different level. Their training was a precision instrument, every element carefully planned and executed. She also began to notice Thompson himself. He arrived early and stayed late, often remaining at the range long after his team had finished their exercises. Sometimes she would see him alone at one of the distant target stands, making notes in a small notebook or adjusting equipment with meticulous care. He approached training with the same intensity she had seen in his interactions with his team, focused, purposeful, and completely committed to excellence. One afternoon, Sarah was replacing targets at Range Bravo when she heard her name called. Turning, she saw Thompson approaching with his characteristic confident stride. But something was different about his demeanor. He seemed less formal, more approachable than during their previous interaction. "Ms. Martinez," he said as he reached her position. "I wanted to thank you for something." Sarah was puzzled. "What for, sir?" Thompson gestured toward the targets she had just replaced. "Yesterday, during our long-range exercise, one of my shooters made a critical shot at 1,000 yards. It was a perfect hit, center mass. But what made it possible wasn't just his skill or my spotting. It was the fact that the target was perfectly positioned, the stand was rock-solid stable, and every piece of equipment was functioning flawlessly. He paused, looking directly at her. That's your work, Ms. Martinez. Your attention to detail, your commitment to excellence. It contributes directly to our mission success. Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest. In 3 years of work at the facility, she had never received feedback that connected her daily tasks to actual mission outcomes. Thompson's words made her feel valued in a way that went beyond simple job performance. I just do my job, sir, she said, but even as she spoke, she realized that wasn't entirely true anymore. She was doing more than just her job. She was contributing to something that mattered. Thompson smiled. No, Ms. Martinez. You do your job exceptionally well. And, in our line of work, exceptional performance in every role can mean the difference between mission success and mission failure. As Thompson walked away, Sarah stood among the target stands, feeling a profound shift in her understanding of her place in the world. For years after her divorce, she had felt disconnected, isolated, like she was simply going through the motions of living. But, now she felt part of something larger, something important. Her work mattered, and she mattered. That evening, Sarah called her mother for the first time in weeks. They talked about the everyday details of life, but underneath the conversation was something new, a sense of purpose and connection that had been missing from Sarah's voice for years. Her mother noticed the difference immediately. You sound different, sweetheart, her mother said. Happier. Has something changed? Sarah thought about how to explain it. I guess I finally feel like my work matters, Mom. Like I'm making a real contribution. It was a simple explanation, but it captured something fundamental that had shifted in Sarah's perspective. She had rediscovered the satisfaction of meaningful work, the sense that her efforts contributed to something beyond herself. It was a feeling she hadn't experienced since before her marriage began to fall apart, and it filled her with a quiet joy that she had almost forgotten was possible. 3 weeks had passed since Sarah's conversation with Command Sergeant Major Thompson, and the routine of her work had taken on new meaning. Every morning, she approached her tasks with a sense of purpose that surprised her. The military facility had become more than just a workplace. It felt like she belonged to something important, something that mattered in the world. The desert heat was particularly intense that Tuesday morning as Sarah prepared for what she expected to be a routine day. The schedule board indicated that Thompson's unit would be conducting advanced training exercises throughout the week, which meant she needed to ensure all ranges were in perfect condition. She had developed a heightened attention to detail since understanding how her work connected to their missions. As she loaded her cart with fresh targets, Sarah noticed an unusual amount of activity around the administrative buildings. Several high-ranking officers were gathered in what appeared to be serious discussions, and there was an energy in the air that suggested something significant was happening. She had learned not to ask questions about military operations, but her curiosity was naturally piqued. Range Alpha was her first stop, and she worked efficiently to replace the standard targets used for basic marksmanship training. The routine had become second nature to her, but she found herself double-checking every detail. Were the targets perfectly centered? Was each stand completely stable? These questions had become automatic since Thompson helped her understand the importance of precision in every aspect of their work. As she moved toward Range Bravo, Sarah noticed Thompson approaching from the direction of the command building. His expression was more serious than usual, and he walked with the purposeful stride she had come to associate with mission-critical activities. When he reached her position, she could see tension in his face that hadn't been there during their previous interactions. Ms. Martinez, he said, his voice carrying an undercurrent of urgency. I need to speak with you about today's training schedule. Sarah set down the target she was carrying and gave him her full attention. Of course, sir. What do you need? Thompson glanced around, ensuring they were out of earshot of anyone else. We've received orders for an immediate deployment. The team will be leaving tonight for a mission that requires the highest level of precision shooting skills. The gravity of his words hit Sarah immediately. This wasn't training anymore. The skills Thompson's team had been perfecting on these ranges were about to be put to use in real-world situations where lives hung in the balance. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. What does that mean for the range schedule, she asked, though she sensed there was more to this conversation than scheduling adjustments. We need to conduct one final training exercise this afternoon, Thompson explained. It's a critical rehearsal for the mission parameters we'll be facing. The target distances will be extreme, and the conditions need to be absolutely perfect. Sarah nodded, understanding the importance of what he was describing. I'll make sure every target stand is checked and rechecked. Range Charlie will be in perfect condition. Thompson's expression softened slightly, and she saw a hint of the appreciation she had witnessed before. I know you will, Ms. Martinez. Your work has been exceptional, and it's contributed more to our readiness than you might realize. As Thompson began to walk away, he turned back toward her. There's something else, he said. This afternoon's exercise will include some unusual elements. We'll be simulating extreme distance shots under challenging conditions. The setup will be different from our normal training. Sarah was intrigued. Different how? We'll be shooting from elevated positions to simulate real-world tactical situations. Some of the targets will be placed at distances and angles we haven't used before. It's going to require perfect coordination between shooters and spotters. The complexity of what Thompson was describing fascinated Sarah. She had watched their training exercises many times, but this sounded like something entirely different. Is there anything special I need to do for the setup? Thompson considered her question carefully. Actually, yes. We'll need some targets placed in positions that are difficult to access with a vehicle. The terrain is rough, and the distances are significant. It's going to require someone to walk to those positions and manually place the targets. Sarah realized immediately that this was a task that would fall to her. The terrain around Range Charlie was challenging, with rocky outcroppings and steep inclines that made vehicle access impossible in some areas. She had hiked to distant target positions before, but never for distances as extreme as Thompson was describing. How far are we talking about? She asked. The furthest position is approximately 1,500 yards from the firing line, Thompson replied. It's at the top of a ridge that overlooks the entire range complex. The shot would be at a downward angle, simulating an urban environment where the sniper has elevated positioning. 1,500 yards. Nearly a mile. Sarah tried to imagine making a precision shot at that distance, accounting for wind, elevation, and angle. The level of skill required was almost beyond comprehension. But her job was to ensure the targets were in place for the shooters to demonstrate that skill. I'll need to start early to get everything positioned properly, Sarah said. What time do you need to begin the exercise? 1400 hours, Thompson replied. But, Ms. Martinez, I want you to understand something. This isn't just another training exercise. The mission we're deploying for tonight involves exactly these types of shots. The training we do this afternoon could mean the difference between mission success and failure. The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders. Her work had always mattered, but now it felt directly connected to a real mission with real consequences. The targets she placed would be used to verify that these men were ready for whatever challenge awaited them. I understand, sir, Sarah said. Everything will be perfect. Thompson studied her face for a moment, as if evaluating her readiness for the responsibility he was placing on her. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him, because he nodded with confidence. I believe it will be, he said. Thank you, Ms. Martinez. As Thompson walked away, Sarah stood in the desert heat, contemplating the magnitude of what lay ahead. She would need to hike to positions she had never accessed before, carrying targets and equipment across difficult terrain. The physical challenge would be significant, but the knowledge that her work would directly impact a real mission added an emotional weight that was both exciting and daunting. Sarah returned to the equipment shed and began planning her approach to the afternoon setup. She studied topographical maps of the range complex, identifying the best routes to the distant target positions Thompson had described. The 1,500-yard position would be the most challenging, requiring a steep climb up a rocky ridge that rose several hundred feet above the desert floor. She gathered her equipment with unusual care. Each target needed to be perfect, each stand needed to be absolutely stable, and every piece of hardware needed to function flawlessly. She packed extra stakes for securing the stands, additional tools for adjustments, and backup targets in case any were damaged during transport. The hike to the distant positions began at noon, giving her 2 hours to complete the setup before Thompson's team arrived. The first position, at 800 yards, was relatively easy to access via an existing trail. Sarah placed the target carefully, ensuring it was perfectly vertical and securely anchored against the desert wind. The second position, at 1,200 yards, required hiking across a rocky wash and up a moderately steep slope. The target stand needed to be positioned on a narrow shelf of rock that provided clear sight lines back to the firing position. Sarah took extra time to ensure the stand was perfectly stable, using additional stakes and guy lines to secure it against any possible movement. The final position, at 1,500 yards, presented the greatest challenge. The climb to the ridgetop was steep and demanding, requiring her to carry the target and stand equipment in multiple trips. The desert heat made the physical effort even more taxing, but Sarah was determined to complete the task perfectly. From the ridgetop, the view back to Range Charlie was breathtaking. The firing position appeared impossibly small in the distance, a tiny speck on the desert floor. The idea that someone could make a precision shot across this distance seemed almost supernatural. But she had seen Thompson's team train, and she knew their capabilities were far beyond ordinary human limits. Sarah positioned the target with meticulous care, using a small surveying instrument to ensure it was perfectly aligned with the firing position. The stand was anchored with multiple stakes driven deep into cracks in the rock, and guy lines provided additional stability. When she was finished, the target was as secure as she could possibly make it. The hike back to the firing position took 45 minutes, and Sarah arrived with just enough time to check the intermediate targets before Thompson's team was scheduled to arrive. She was exhausted from the physical effort, but satisfied that every target was positioned perfectly for the critical training exercise. At exactly 2 o'clock, the convoy of vehicles arrived at Range Charlie. Sarah watched from her position near the equipment shed as Thompson's team unloaded their gear with practiced efficiency. Their weapons were different from what she had seen before: longer, heavier rifles equipped with massive scopes and other specialized equipment she didn't recognize. Thompson approached her as she prepared to leave the area. "Are all positions ready?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied. "Every target is secure and properly positioned. The 1,500-yard target is on the ridgetop, with clear sight lines from your firing position." Thompson handed her a pair of military binoculars. "I'd like you to stay for this exercise," he said. "Position yourself behind the firing line and observe. I think you should see what your work makes possible." Sarah was surprised by the invitation. She had never been asked to observe training exercises before, and she felt honored by Thompson's request. She found a position well behind the firing line that provided a clear view of the shooters and their equipment. Thompson's team moved with the precision she had come to expect. They established firing positions, set up spotting scopes, and began the complex process of calculating shooting solutions for the extreme distance targets. Sarah could hear fragments of their conversations: wind speed measurements, elevation adjustments, humidity readings. The level of technical detail was staggering. The first shots were fired at the 800-yard target. Through the binoculars, Sarah could see the impacts on the target, tight groupings that demonstrated exceptional accuracy. The shooters worked in pairs, with one man firing while another provided spotting and guidance. Their coordination was seamless, the result of countless hours of training together. When they moved to the 1,200-yard target, Sarah was amazed to see that their accuracy remained consistent. The shots took longer to reach the target, and the sound of the impacts arrived several seconds after the muzzle flashes. But the hits were still precise, clustered in the center of the target area. The final shots, at the 1,500-yard target Sarah had positioned on the ridgetop, seemed almost impossible. Through the binoculars, she could barely make out the target itself, and the idea that someone could hit it with a rifle seemed beyond belief. But Thompson's team approached the challenge with the same methodical precision they had demonstrated at shorter distances. The first shot missed, the impact visible as a small puff of dust on the rocks near the target. Adjustments were made, calculations refined, and a second shot was fired. This one hit the target, and Sarah could see the bullet hole appear in the paper. The team continued shooting, and their accuracy improved with each shot as they refined their techniques for the extreme distance. As Sarah watched the exercise unfold, she felt a profound sense of pride in her contribution. The targets she had positioned were enabling these men to perfect skills they would need for their mission that night. Every shot fired was a step toward ensuring they were ready for whatever challenges awaited them. When the exercise concluded, Thompson approached Sarah with an expression of satisfaction. "Excellent work, Ms. Martinez," he said. "The target placement was perfect.
The team achieved the accuracy standards we needed for tonight's mission. Sarah felt a surge of pride unlike anything she had experienced in years. Her work had directly contributed to preparing these warriors for a real mission. It was a responsibility she had never imagined when she first took the job, but one that filled her with a sense of purpose and accomplishment. "Thank you for letting me observe," Sarah said. "It was incredible to see what you and your team can accomplish." Thompson nodded, then seemed to consider something carefully. "Ms. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you needs to remain confidential, but I think you deserve to understand the importance of what happened here today." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of what he was about to share. "Tonight's mission involves hostage rescue in an urban environment," Thompson explained. "American civilians are being held by hostile forces, and conventional rescue methods aren't feasible. The only way to save those people is through precision shooting from extreme distances, exactly like what we practiced today." The enormity of what he was describing hit Sarah like a physical blow. The training exercise she had just supported wasn't theoretical. It was preparation for saving real lives. American citizens were depending on the skills Thompson's team had just demonstrated, and her work had been part of ensuring they were ready. "The shots we made today at 1,500 yards might be the exact shots we need to make tonight to save innocent lives," Thompson continued. "Your work in positioning those targets perfectly contributed directly to our mission readiness." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes, overwhelmed by the realization that her daily work had such profound real-world implications. She had spent 3 years thinking of herself as just a maintenance worker, but Thompson was showing her that she was much more than that. "I had no idea," she whispered. "Most people don't understand how many different roles contribute to mission success," Thompson said. "But every person who helps prepare us for what we do saves lives. That includes you, Ms. Martinez." As Thompson's team began packing their equipment for deployment, Sarah stood in the desert watching them work. These men would soon be risking their lives to save others, using skills they had perfected on the ranges she maintained. The connection between her daily work and their life-or-death missions was now crystal clear. That evening, as Thompson's convoy disappeared into the desert darkness, Sarah remained at the facility longer than usual. She walked back to the ridgetop where she had positioned the 1,500-yard target, thinking about the shots that had been fired there just hours before. Somewhere in the world, those same shooting skills might soon be used to save American lives. Standing on the ridge in the cool evening air, Sarah felt a transformation within herself that was profound and permanent. She was no longer just someone rebuilding her life after divorce and disappointment. She was part of something larger, something that mattered in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her work contributed to protecting innocent people and supporting those who risked everything to serve others. For the first time since her divorce, Sarah felt truly valuable, truly connected to purpose beyond herself. It was a feeling that would change not only how she approached her work, but how she saw herself and her place in the world. 5 days had passed since Thompson's team deployed on their mission, and Sarah found herself checking the news obsessively, searching for any indication of American hostage rescues or special operations activities. The knowledge that she had contributed to preparing them for a life-or-death mission had fundamentally changed how she viewed every aspect of her work. Each target she replaced, every piece of equipment she maintained, now carried the weight of knowing it might be crucial for saving lives. The military facility seemed different without Thompson's unit present. The ranges were still active with other training groups, but none operated with the same intensity and precision she had witnessed from the elite team. Sarah continued her daily routine, but found herself paying even closer attention to details, if that was possible. Every target had to be perfectly positioned, every stand absolutely stable, every piece of equipment functioning flawlessly. On Friday morning, Sarah was conducting routine maintenance on Range Alpha when she noticed a familiar convoy approaching through the desert heat shimmer. Her heart jumped as she recognized the black SUVs that belonged to Thompson's unit. They were back. The relief she felt surprised her with its intensity. Over the past 5 days, she had worried about their safety in ways that went beyond professional concern. These men had become important to her, and she had feared she might never see them again. As the vehicles approached, Sarah could see that the team appeared intact. The same number of men emerged from the SUVs, and their movements showed no signs of injury or trauma. Whatever mission they had undertaken, they had apparently completed it successfully and returned home safely. The knowledge filled Sarah with a profound sense of relief and gratitude. Thompson separated from his team and walked directly toward her position. Even from a distance, Sarah could see that something was different about his demeanor.
He moved with the same confident stride, but there was something in his posture that suggested the weight of recent experiences. When he reached her, she could see in his eyes the look of someone who had witnessed significant events. "Ms. Martinez," he said, his voice carrying a warmth that was new.
"I wanted to personally thank you for your work earlier this week."
Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The way Thompson spoke suggested that her contribution to their pre-mission training had been more significant than she had realized.
"How did everything go, sir?" Thompson glanced around, ensuring their conversation couldn't be overheard by others.
When he spoke again, his voice was quiet but intense.
"The mission was successful.
We were able to rescue 12 American civilians who had been held hostage for 3 weeks.
Everyone came home safely."
The impact of his words hit Sarah like a physical force.
12 people. 12 American civilians who were now safe because of the mission Thompson's team had undertaken.
And her work had been part of preparing them for that success.
The knowledge was almost overwhelming in its emotional intensity.
"The shots we practiced here on Tuesday," Thompson continued, "those exact shooting techniques were used during the mission."
"The 1,500-yard target you positioned on the ridge?"
"We made shots at that distance to neutralize threats and create the opening we needed for the rescue." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as the full implications of what Thompson was telling her sank in. The target she had carried up that steep, rocky ridge had been used to prepare for shots that saved real lives. Her work, her attention to detail, her determination to position everything perfectly, had contributed directly to bringing 12 people home safely. "I don't know what to say," Sarah whispered, struggling to process the magnitude of what she was learning. Thompson's expression softened, and she saw something she had never witnessed before in a military professional of his rank: genuine emotion. "You should know that after the mission, when we were debriefing, I told my commanding officer about the exceptional support we received from the range maintenance team. Specifically, I told him about your work."
Sarah looked at him in surprise.
The idea that Thompson had mentioned her to his commanding officer was both flattering and intimidating.
"What did you tell him?"
"I told him that mission success often depends on dozens of people who never get recognition for their contributions," Thompson said. "I told him that the precision required for our long-range shots was only possible because every aspect of our training environment was perfect. And I told him that perfection was achieved because of your professional dedication and attention to detail." The conversation was taking a direction Sarah had never expected. In 3 years of work at the facility, she had received routine performance evaluations and occasional compliments from supervisors, but nothing approaching the level of recognition Thompson was describing. The knowledge that her work had been specifically acknowledged in connection with a successful mission was profoundly meaningful.
"There's something else," Thompson said. "My commanding officer was impressed enough to request a meeting with you.
He wants to personally thank you for your contribution to mission success, and he has some questions about your background and experience." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. The prospect of meeting with a high-ranking military officer was intimidating, but the recognition for her work was deeply gratifying.
"When would this meeting take place?"
"This afternoon, if you're available," Thompson replied. "Colonel Mitchell will be here at 1500 hours to debrief the mission and conduct some administrative matters.
He's requested 15 minutes of your time."
The rest of the morning passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. Sarah completed her routine tasks with unusual care, wanting to ensure that everything was perfect for whatever inspection or evaluation might accompany the meeting with Colonel Mitchell. She found herself wondering what questions he might ask and what implications this recognition might have for her future at the facility.
At exactly 3 o'clock, Sarah reported to the administrative building where Thompson had told her the meeting would take place.
She had changed into her best work clothes and tried to prepare mentally for whatever the colonel might want to discuss. The nervous energy she felt reminded her of job interviews, but with the added weight of knowing this meeting was connected to a successful mission. Thompson met her in the lobby and escorted her to a conference room where Colonel Mitchell was waiting.
Sarah's first impression of the colonel was of someone who commanded immediate respect.
He was a compact, intense man with graying hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. When he stood to greet her, his handshake was firm and his attention completely focused on her.
"Ms. Martinez," Colonel Mitchell said, "Sergeant Major Thompson has told me excellent things about your work here. I wanted to meet you personally and thank you for your contribution to our recent mission success." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the formal recognition. Thank you, sir. I'm honored to support your team's training.
Colonel Mitchell gestured for her to sit, then took a seat across from her.
Thompson remained standing, but Sarah could sense his supportive presence.
The colonel's demeanor was serious but not intimidating, and she began to relax slightly.
I want you to understand something, Ms. Martinez, Colonel Mitchell began. Special operations missions succeed or fail based on hundreds of small details.
Equipment reliability, training accuracy, logistical support, communications, the list goes on. Each element must be perfect, because any failure can compromise the entire mission. Sarah nodded, beginning to understand where the conversation was heading. What Sergeant Major Thompson told me about your work goes beyond routine maintenance, the colonel continued.
He described someone who understands that precision in support roles directly impacts operational success. That level of understanding is rare, and it's extremely valuable. The colonel paused, studying Sarah's face carefully.
Thompson also told me about your background, about how you came to work here after some personal challenges. What impresses me is that you didn't just take a job, you found a way to excel and to connect your work to our mission.
Sarah felt a warmth spreading through her chest.
The recognition that her personal journey and professional growth had been noticed by someone of Colonel Mitchell's rank was deeply meaningful. The work has given me a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years, she said honestly.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear, Colonel Mitchell replied. Because I have a proposition for you. Sarah's attention sharpened.
The meeting had taken another unexpected turn. We're expanding our training operations, the colonel explained. New facilities, more advanced equipment, larger teams. We need someone to oversee range maintenance and target placement for multiple sites, someone who understands that this work is mission critical. The implications of what he was describing began to dawn on Sarah. This wasn't just recognition for past work, it was an opportunity for advancement and increased responsibility. The position would involve travel to different training sites, working with various special operations units, and ensuring that every facility meets the highest standards for precision training, Colonel Mitchell continued. It would be a significant increase in responsibility and compensation. Sarah felt her mind racing as she tried to process what was being offered. The opportunity represented everything she had lost when her marriage failed: career advancement, financial security, professional recognition, and, most importantly, meaningful work that connected to something larger than herself. I don't know what to say, Sarah said, echoing her earlier response to Thompson's news about the mission's success.
Colonel Mitchell smiled, the first time she had seen him show any emotion beyond professional seriousness. Say you'll consider it. Take time to think about whether this is the direction you want your career to go. Talk to your family, consider the implications, and let us know your decision. After the meeting, Thompson walked Sarah back to her vehicle.
The desert afternoon was cooling as evening approached, and she found herself struggling to process everything that had happened. In the span of 1 week, she had gone from routine maintenance worker to someone being recruited for a significant position based on her contribution to mission success.
This is a big opportunity, Thompson said as they walked. But I want you to know that the offer is based on genuine merit.
You've earned this recognition through your work, not because anyone feels sorry for your personal situation.
Sarah appreciated his directness.
The distinction was important to her.
How common is it for civilian contractors to be offered this type of advancement?
Very rare, Thompson admitted. Usually, positions like this go to former military personnel with specialized backgrounds. The fact that you're being considered says a lot about how your work has been perceived. They reached Sarah's vehicle, and she turned to face Thompson directly.
Can I ask you something personal? Thompson nodded. When you first started talking to me about the importance of my work, was this already being considered? Were you evaluating me for this position? Thompson's expression became thoughtful. Honestly? No.
Initially, I was just trying to help you understand how your work connected to our mission. But, as I observed your response, as I saw how you elevated your performance when you understood the stakes, that's when I began to think you might be capable of more.
The answer satisfied Sarah.
The opportunity was genuine, based on her demonstrated capabilities rather than some predetermined plan.
What would you do if you were in my position? Sarah asked.
Thompson considered the question carefully.
3 years ago, you were in a different place in your life. You took this job because you needed stability and independence.
Now you have both of those things, plus you've discovered that you have talents and capabilities you might not have known you possessed. He paused, looking out across the desert landscape.
The question isn't what I would do.
The question is what the person you've become over the past 3 years wants to do.
Are you ready to take on bigger challenges? Are you ready to have your work impact even more missions, save even more lives?
That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, thinking about the conversation with Colonel Mitchell and Thompson's parting words. The decision before her was about more than just career advancement.
It was about choosing the direction for the next phase of her life.
3 years earlier, she had been broken by divorce and betrayal, uncertain about her future and struggling to rebuild her life. The job at the military facility had been a lifeline, offering stability when she desperately needed it. But now she had the opportunity to transform that stability into something much more significant. The work had given her a sense of purpose and connection she hadn't felt since before her marriage began to deteriorate. More than that, it had shown her capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. Her attention to detail, her dedication to excellence, her ability to understand how individual tasks connected to larger objectives. These weren't just job skills. They were strengths that could be applied to increasingly important responsibilities. Sarah thought about the 12 people who were now safe because of the mission Thompson's team had completed. Her work had been a small but crucial part of bringing them home. The opportunity Colonel Mitchell was offering would allow her to contribute to many more such missions, to play a larger role in supporting those who risked their lives to protect others. As she considered the decision, Sarah realized that her perspective on risk had fundamentally changed. 3 years ago, taking this job had seemed like a safe choice, a way to avoid further disappointment and maintain independence. Now, the safe choice would be to stay in her current position, where she was comfortable and successful. But the person she had become over the past 3 years wasn't interested in just playing it safe. She had discovered that meaningful work required accepting bigger challenges, greater responsibilities, and, yes, greater risks. The opportunity Colonel Mitchell was offering represented all of those things. By the time Sarah went to bed that night, she knew what her decision would be. The next phase of her life would be about growth, challenge, and contributing to missions that mattered. She had learned that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined, and now she had the opportunity to prove it. The following morning, Sarah called the number Colonel Mitchell had given her and left a message accepting the position. As she hung up the phone, she felt the same mixture of nervousness and excitement she had experienced before any major life change. But underneath those emotions was something new, a confidence that she could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. Her journey from broken divorcee to mission-critical professional had taken 3 years. The next phase of that journey would take her places she couldn't yet imagine, but she was ready for whatever came next. 6 months had passed since Sarah accepted Colonel Mitchell's offer, and her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. The position as Senior Range Operations Coordinator had taken her to military facilities across 3 states, working with some of the most elite special operations units in the American military. Each assignment brought new challenges, but also deepened her understanding of how crucial precision support was to mission success. The morning sun was just breaking over the horizon at the mountain facility in Colorado where Sarah was currently stationed. This was her most challenging assignment, yet a high-altitude training center where special operations teams prepared for missions in mountainous terrain. The thin air at 9,000 feet elevation made every physical task more demanding, and the extreme weather conditions tested both equipment and personnel to their limits. Sarah stood at the edge of Range Echo, reviewing the setup for the morning's training exercise. The targets were positioned at distances ranging from 800 to 2,000 yards, each placement carefully calculated to simulate the challenging shooting conditions these teams might face in real operations. The longest shots required accounting not only for the standard factors of wind and humidity, but also for the significant effects of altitude on bullet trajectory. Over the past 6 months, Sarah had developed expertise she never knew was possible. She could now calculate optimal target placement for various weather conditions, terrain features, and tactical scenarios. More importantly, she had learned to understand the unique requirements of different special operations units. Navy SEALs trained differently from Army Rangers, who approached marksmanship differently from Air Force Special Operations. Each group required customized range setups that reflected their specific mission parameters. The sound of approaching vehicles broke her concentration. A convoy was making its way up the winding mountain road toward the facility. According to her schedule, this should be Delta Team, a new unit she hadn't worked with before. The briefing materials indicated they were preparing for a mission in Afghanistan, where they would need to engage targets at extreme distances in mountainous terrain very similar to the Colorado facility. As the convoy reached the parking area, Sarah recognized the familiar efficiency of special operations personnel. The team members emerged from their vehicles with practiced coordination, immediately beginning to unload their equipment. Their weapons were impressive even by the standards she had become accustomed to: massive rifles with scopes that probably cost more than most people's cars. A tall, lean man with the bearing of a senior non-commissioned officer approached her.
Ms. Martinez? I'm Master Sergeant Rodriguez. We spoke on the phone about today's training requirements.
Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact that characterized all the special operations professionals she had worked with.
Welcome to the mountain facility, Sergeant. The ranges are ready for your training scenarios.
Rodriguez glanced toward the distant target positions, visible as tiny specks against the mountainside.
Those distances look significant. What's the furthest target placement?
2,000 yards, Sarah replied. That's the maximum distance we can achieve while maintaining clear sightlines and safe backstops. The target is positioned on a ledge about 800 feet higher than the firing position, which creates the downward angle you requested for your mission simulation.
The Master Sergeant nodded approvingly. Perfect. That matches the terrain conditions we'll be facing overseas.
As Rodriguez's team began setting up their equipment, Sarah observed their preparations with the practiced eye she had developed over months of working with elite units. These men moved with the same precision and intensity she had first witnessed with Thompson's team, but each unit had its own character and approach to training.
Delta Team's specialization became apparent as they established their firing positions.
They were mountain warfare specialists, trained to operate in some of the most challenging terrain on Earth. Their equipment reflected this specialization: cold weather gear, altitude compensation devices, and specialized communications equipment designed to function in extreme conditions.
Ms. Martinez, Rodriguez called her over to the firing line. I'd like you to observe today's exercise if you have time.
We're going to be pushing the limits of what's possible at this altitude, and your feedback on target visibility and positioning would be valuable. Sarah felt the familiar surge of professional pride that came with being included in these training exercises. Over the past 6 months, she had evolved from someone who simply maintained ranges to a technical advisor whose input was actively sought by the teams she supported.
The first series of shots began at the 800-yard distance.
Even at that relatively short range for these shooters, the effects of altitude were noticeable. Bullets traveled faster in the thin air but also behaved differently, requiring adjustments to their normal calculations. Sarah watched through high-powered binoculars as the team worked through these adjustments, their shots gradually tightening into precise groupings. As they progressed to longer distances, the complexity of the shooting problem increased dramatically. At 1,500 yards, the bullets were in flight for several seconds, during which time wind conditions could shift, affecting trajectory. The shooters worked in pairs, with one man firing while his partner provided spotting and wind readings through powerful scopes.
Watch this next series, Rodriguez said to Sarah. We're going to attempt the 2,000-yard shots. At this distance and altitude, we're operating at the absolute edge of what's technically possible.
Sarah focused her binoculars on the distant target, barely visible against the mountainside. The idea that anyone could hit such a small target at that distance seemed impossible, but she had learned never to underestimate the capabilities of these elite professionals. The first shot missed, the impact visible as a small puff of dust on the rocks near the target. Calculations were adjusted, wind readings updated, and a second shot fired.
This one hit the target, and Sarah could see the bullet hole appear in the paper.
The shooter and spotter exchanged brief comments, making further refinements to their technique. The subsequent shots demonstrated the kind of precision Sarah had come to associate with special operations training. The hits were consistent, clustered in the center of the target area. At 2,000 yards, in thin mountain air, with challenging wind conditions, these men were achieving accuracy that defied belief. As the exercise concluded, Rodriguez approached Sarah with an expression of satisfaction.
Excellent target placement, Ms. Martinez.
The setup perfectly simulated the conditions we'll face on our mission. Sarah felt the familiar warmth of knowing her work had contributed to preparing these men for real-world challenges.
When do you deploy? Next week, Rodriguez replied.
We'll be operating in the Hindu Kush Mountains, where shots at these distances might be necessary to support ground operations.
The conversation was interrupted by Rodriguez's radio crackling to life. He listened to a brief message, then turned back to Sarah with a more serious expression. "I just received word that we need to conduct an additional exercise this afternoon. The mission parameters have changed, and we need to verify our capabilities under different conditions." Sarah was intrigued. What kind of different conditions? Rodriguez considered his answer carefully. The mission now includes a hostage rescue component. We may need to engage targets in close proximity to civilians. That requires a completely different level of precision than what we just demonstrated. The implications of what Rodriguez was describing were sobering. Sarah had learned enough about special operations to understand that shots taken near hostages required not just exceptional accuracy, but absolute certainty. There was no margin for error when innocent lives were at stake. "What do you need from me?" Sarah asked. "We'll need targets set up to simulate hostage scenarios," Rodriguez explained. "Multiple targets at varying distances, some positioned to represent threats near civilians. The shooting solutions will be much more complex than what we just practiced." Sarah spent the afternoon setting up the most challenging target array she had ever created. The scenario required targets representing hostage takers positioned at different distances and angles, with additional targets representing hostages that absolutely could not be hit. The precision required to engage the correct targets while avoiding the wrong ones would test these soldiers' skills to the absolute limit. As she worked to position the targets with mathematical precision, Sarah reflected on how far she had come since her first day at the Nevada facility. What had started as a job maintaining basic shooting ranges had evolved into technical expertise in complex tactical scenarios. She now understood ballistics, weather effects, and target placement with a precision that rivaled many military professionals. The afternoon exercise was the most intense training Sarah had ever witnessed. The Delta team members approached each shot with extraordinary care, taking long minutes to verify their targeting before firing. The stakes of the simulation failure to hit the correct target could mean civilian casualties in the real mission made every shot a life-or-death decision. Sarah watched through binoculars as the team successfully engaged multiple targets in sequence, their shots precise enough to eliminate threats while avoiding simulated hostages positioned nearby. The level of skill required was beyond anything she had previously imagined possible. When the exercise concluded, Rodriguez approached her with an expression of deep gratitude. "Ms. Martinez, that target setup was exactly what we needed. The team achieved the precision standards required for the mission." As Rodriguez's team prepared to leave the facility, Sarah felt a profound sense of connection to their upcoming mission. In a few days, these men would be operating in dangerous territory, using skills they had perfected on ranges she had prepared. The shots they had practiced today might soon be used to save American lives in hostile territory. That evening, as Sarah completed her daily reports, she received an unexpected phone call. It was Thompson, calling from an undisclosed location where his team was conducting training. "Sarah," Thompson said, using her first name for the first time she could remember. "I heard about your work with Delta Team today. Rodriguez spoke very highly of your technical expertise." Sarah was pleased to hear from Thompson, whose initial recognition had started her journey toward this new career. "It's been an incredible learning experience," she said. "Every assignment teaches me something new about how these operations work." "That's exactly what I hoped would happen when Colonel Mitchell offered you this position," Thompson replied. "But I'm calling about something specific. We have a situation developing that requires your expertise." Sarah's attention sharpened. "What kind of situation?" "Without going into classified details, I can tell you that we're planning an operation that will require the most precise shooting ever attempted by American forces," Thompson explained. "The target distances and conditions are beyond anything that's been attempted before. We need someone to design and establish a training facility that can prepare our shooters for what they'll face." The magnitude of what Thompson was describing was staggering. If he was saying this would be the most challenging shooting mission ever attempted, the technical requirements must be extraordinary. Where would this training take place? "That's to be determined," Thompson said. "We're looking at several possible locations, but the facility will need to be custom designed for the specific mission parameters." "It's exactly the kind of challenge I think you're ready to handle." After the call ended, Sarah sat in her small quarters at the Colorado facility, thinking about the opportunities that continued to expand before her. 18 months ago, she had been a divorced woman taking a maintenance job to rebuild her life.
Now she was being asked to design a custom training facility for what might be the most challenging military operation ever attempted. The transformation seemed almost impossible to believe, but it was real. Her work had evolved from maintaining simple targets to developing complex training scenarios for the most elite soldiers in the world. More than that, her contributions were directly saving lives and supporting missions that protected American interests around the globe. Over the following weeks, Sarah worked with Thompson and other military planners to develop specifications for the new training facility. The project required every skill she had developed over the past year and pushed her to learn new areas of expertise. She studied advanced ballistics, consulted with meteorologists about weather effects on long-range shooting, and worked with engineers to design target systems that could simulate conditions no one had ever attempted before. The facility they designed was eventually constructed in a remote area of Montana, where the terrain and climate could approximate the conditions of the planned mission. Sarah oversaw every aspect of its construction, ensuring that each target position was placed with mathematical precision and that every piece of equipment met the highest possible standards. When Thompson's team arrived for training at the new facility, Sarah felt a deep sense of professional pride. The ranges she had designed were more complex and challenging than anything that had ever been built before. The longest target distances exceeded anything previously attempted in military training, and the precision required would test even these elite soldiers to their limits. As she watched Thompson's team begin their training on ranges she had designed specifically for their mission, Sarah realized that her journey had come full circle. The woman who had once thought her only value was in simple maintenance tasks was now creating facilities that would prepare America's best warriors for their most challenging missions. The shots Thompson's team fired during their training at the Montana facility represented the culmination of everything Sarah had learned about supporting special operations. Each target hit meant these soldiers were better prepared for the dangers they would soon face. Each successful exercise brought them closer to mission readiness. 3 months later, Sarah received word that Thompson's mission had been completed successfully. The details remained classified, but she was told that the extreme distance shooting techniques they had practiced at her facility had been crucial to the mission's success. Once again, her work had contributed to saving lives and achieving objectives that protected American interests. Standing on the observation deck of the Montana facility as the sun set over the distant mountains, Sarah reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. She had discovered capabilities within herself that she never knew existed, found purpose in work that directly contributed to protecting others, and built a career that gave her both financial security and deep personal satisfaction. The broken woman who had taken a maintenance job to survive had become a technical expert whose work enabled some of the most important military operations in the world. It was a transformation that proved people could overcome even the most devastating personal setbacks and find not just recovery, but purpose and excellence beyond anything they had previously imagined possible. As Sarah looked toward the future, she knew there would be new challenges, new missions, new opportunities to contribute to protecting innocent lives around the world. The journey that began with simply replacing paper targets had become a career dedicated to ensuring America's warriors had every possible advantage when they faced the dangers that threatened freedom and security. She had found her calling in the most unexpected place, discovered her value through work she never could have imagined, and built a life that mattered in ways that went far beyond her own personal happiness and success. It was, she realized, exactly the kind of life she had always hoped to live, even when she couldn't have described what that might look like. The targets she placed, the ranges she designed, the precision she demanded in every detail, all of it contributed to missions that saved lives and protected the innocent. It was meaningful work performed by someone who had learned that her best self emerged when she was contributing to something larger than her own immediate concerns. Sarah Martinez had found her purpose, and, in doing so, had discovered that recovery from life's worst setbacks was not just possible, but could lead to achievements and contributions beyond anything she had ever dared to imagine.